Now, how do we form these we relationships? It's a major theme for today we'll dig into deeply, but I want to share one very clear, straightforward principle with you. I mentioned I did a lot of research with people in writing this book, We, about how to determine what it is that makes a relationship a real true partnership, a we relationship. I thought when I interviewed people about these relationships, they would describe the relationship to me, but most of the time what they described to me were the events that built the relationship. Like there was this time I had a challenge and he or she really helped me through it. Makes sense if you think about it. Relationships don't just happen overnight, they grow in increments. Think about some people you become good friends with in the past few years. I say the last few years you can remember what caused a relationship to move ahead. There were times you hung out with these friends, a great Saturday night out, or you did something social event together, and your relationship was better at the end of that interaction than it was at the beginning. Relationships move forward in steps. If you look at the bottom of page 11, you'll see a little model where it says the relationship building encounter. This is a very straightforward principle. You have an interaction with a customer. It starts here, it ends here. Maybe it's a 1-minute phone call, maybe it's an hour together, maybe it's a few hours together, whatever it is, you have an interaction. And what happens to your relationship during that interaction? Well, 3 things can happen. Your relationship gets better, it stays the same, or it gets worse. We love it when this happens. This is no fun, right? The terminology we'll use today is when you interact with a customer and throughout that interaction your relationship improves, we call that an encounter, a relationship building encounter. On the other hand, when we have an interaction with a customer and the relationship either stays static or gets worse, we're going to call that a transaction. Give me an example. Your personal life. Maybe it's a Saturday afternoon. You're running errands. You're the customer. And you have a transaction with a business. What's an example of that?
Oil change.
An oil change, right. You walk in there, the guy, they process your payment. You wait for the 20 minutes for the quick oil change. You could drive out of that oil change bay and run into one of the people that serviced your car an hour later. You would have no idea you ever met each other because it was just transactional. It's like you go into a restaurant. The server comes up to your table, takes your drink orders, tells you the nightly specials. And 2 minutes later, you're like, which one's our waiter? Because it was very transactional. Think of that contrasted with a relationship building encounter. When you interact with your customer and they start to feel that bond. Like let's say you have a first conversation with a couple about listing their home. I'm not going to say you're going to have a fabulous we relationship after one meeting, but what if it's an encounter and your relationship does start to move forward? And the other professionals who are in there talking to them just transact and tell them all about themselves and all the homes they've sold and show them their marketing materials, but don't really create that bond. Do you think you have a leg up earning the next stage in earning that customer's business? Have you started to develop some commitment because they're starting to get that feeling of we? Sure, it's not fully formed, but it's come a long ways, hasn't it? So this is what we want to think about, is how we can create this idea of the relationship building encounter. And we all have a million examples. You had those last night at the reception. You either met somebody for the first time or saw somebody you hadn't seen since this conference last year, and you had a great conversation, and your relationship improved. That feel good? This is what we want to be thinking about. Every time you interact with a customer, a client or any other customer, yes, there is business to be done, but if you can also have in your mind, we're trying to bring a relationship forward. And this is a real fundamental principle. I'll give you an example that is not necessarily in the kind of professional work that you guys do, but I think you can understand this. How many of you have heard of Kimpton Hotels? So Kimpton Hotels is a wonderful company that in the mid-2000s had about 45 wonderful boutique hotels. They've since been purchased by Intercontinental, who fortunately have not gotten in their way. They're still able to operate really well. And Kimpton brought my team in to help with guest loyalty, customer loyalty. Now, if you are a hotel company, how do they normally create loyalty from their guests? Points, right? And if you're Marriott or Hilton, or back in those days, Starwood, you have thousands of hotels where people can earn points, And just about anywhere they want to go on vacation, there are thousands of hotels where you can use your points. Kimpton, we had 45 hotels. We couldn't compete on points. We didn't have the scale. So how are we going to compete for guest loyalty? Well, we did some research, and I come from the hotel business, and I was stunned by what I saw. I'd never seen this. Kimpton guests in this study were describing to us the relationship they felt they had with their hotel they stayed at, or multiple hotels. Never seen that before. Never seen anything like that to that extent. So we realized for competing for loyalty, as opposed to making it be about points, let's make it be about relationships. Now, if your loyalty program for a hotel company is about points, and what do you want to do? You got to have some database people, maybe in basement windowless offices crunching numbers, and some marketing people to write cool copy and create mailers, right? But if you're competing on relationships, you can't just depend on marketing people and database people. You need real live employees creating relationships with guests as they encounter them. We created a program called Kimpton Moments. They're still doing this like 13 years later, which taught employees your job when you check somebody in at the front desk or serve a meal isn't just to do those things, but also focus on building the relationship with that guest at that moment. Now, I know you guys are doing jobs that are a lot different than checking people into hotels, but think about the same principle. Every time you interact with a client or another customer, how can you be making sure your relationship moves forward?